sure it's showing. All right, if you can see the stream, can somebody chat in the message window for us just to make sure real quick? Because I'm not seeing it.
Works for me.
Do you see it on YouTube? Oh, yep, there we go. Okay, got it. All right, well, welcome again to our monthly Modonaut Modcast here, and it's my great pleasure to introduce the legend, if you will, the man, the myth. Many of you know Tor Frick. Tor is just an amazing modeler, an amazing artist. He has now recently spun out of the game industry to a certain extent, but now started his own company. He's co-founded Neon Giant with a few others there in Sweden, and is working on an untitled game at this point in time. But we'll be showing various different tools and techniques that he uses in his day-to-day process for creating game art for Unreal Engine. Is that right, Tor? Is that where you are outputting this right now?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tor. A little general housekeeping things. I'll be trying to answer. I'm Shane, by the way, if you don't recognize my voice. Product manager for Modo and a few other products here at the Foundry. But I'll be on the Modo Geeks TV account over in the chat window answering a few questions. And then I'll try to interrupt Tor here and there and hopefully not be too disruptive, but I'll try to catch his attention with any other questions that might pop up for him to answer. And yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Tor, to take us through some pretty cool stuff of what you do every day.
All right. Let's see. I think I have an echo here on my voice.
Make sure you mute the YouTube channel if you hear that.
It is. I think it's yours.
It's mine? Okay, let me mute mine.
Right, so yeah, no, it's gone. Okay, so I'm gonna be showing a little bit of how I create low polys for once. So I have this weapon that I prepared just for our game. So I'm just gonna go through a little bit on how I create my low poly assets and just a little bit of tips and tricks and stuff regarding that, and how I approach different types of low poly creation, essentially. So this is a mix of pretty much a little bit of sub-D geometry, a little bit of low poly geometry. Some of it is mock booleans. I'm gonna be taking that and I'm gonna start converting to low poly and show some UV mapping and so on. Most of the time when I do low poly stuff, I'm actually reusing the existing model. So I don't really use the topology tool on top of things unless it's something that is very, very complicated and you need to draw like a cage around it. Most of the time I reuse the stuff and just kind of weld it together, simplify it in different ways. So especially since I make mostly hard surface stuff, so most of the time you can kind of reuse existing content instead of just building like a brand new topology over it. When I do characters, stuff like that, I tend to use the topology stuff way more. But for this kind of stuff, I almost always just reuse things. And one of the things that I try to think about is that when I create my high poly assets, I actually think about the low poly to be from the very beginning. So I tend to create cylinders that have a number of sides that I can divide. So I often create 8 or 16 sided cylinders just so I can easily cut them down the worst is like when you create like a 13-sided cylinder. That's the worst. So I'm just gonna start by hiding some of the Boolean stuff. So I'm gonna be doing a lot of stuff that is tied to scripts and macros. In general, when you create low poly, I mean, low poly geometry is one of the things that is really beneficial to use macros and stuff like that, because it's such a repetitive task. A lot of the time, you're just doing the same kind of process over and over again with different elements. So I'm just gonna start copy pasting some geometry. Assign a material, different color for it, and here I'm using weighted subds, and I love to use weighted subds, especially when you're converting something to low poly, because then you already have, you don't need the support loops, so you can just go in and then just delete the edge loops like this, and it's gonna retain its shape. You can just quickly get rid of pretty much all the unnecessary loops. And I try to just remove stuff like this, and I don't care about the fact that I have an n-gon, because modus triangulation almost always does something like this. So if you triangulate it and then quadrulate it, I'm using Seneca's quadrulate script, you get like a good topology anyway. So I don't really care about the fact that I create messy n-gons when I'm simplifying things. So that's for very simple stuff like this, it's just really quick to convert. Same thing with the stuff like this. Use the same method. I often clean things up before I turn off the subds, because it's just makes it easier to select. Because if you have, for example, some support loops and they're very visible, say something like this, and they would have been very, very close to the edge like this. Selecting them like this, it's a much more of a pain in the ass. So I try to just select and remove things while I'm still in subd mode, just because it makes it easier to select things. I don't know if Shane, are you still there? Because I can't hear you.
Yeah, no, you're still going good.
Yeah.
So
I was wondering if you were
sorry
disappeared.
About that. Yeah. Nope.
Oh. Often when I have stuff like this, this is the kind of things that are really annoying to just build low poly for, because like these could be separate elements or they could be the same element. So I try to just, while I'm building the low poly, I often use selection tools, select everything on the same plane, and then I just snap them down to the same height, and then I just kind of merge them together using a Boolean, quick Boolean, and then it's kind of messy, and you have a little bit of intersecting things like this. And the first thing I normally do is just turn on the merge tool, and I just drag it around a little bit. And now I got rid of some of the tiny things, so I don't have to go in and manually clean that up. And when I have stuff like this, I often end up doing just going to a subd mode just to see what's going on. Just selecting the what's it called, boundary edges, and just adding polygons there. And now we have some really funky geometry here, and then I can just select these in subd mode, or just and merge them. So when I triangulate them again, it have modus triangulation has fixed up the messy geometry. So a lot of the time I just rely on Modo actually cleaning up the n-gons for me, so I don't have to do it by hand, which is pretty convenient. More merging of stuff. And then
that's a pretty cool tip, to use the sub-D mode to actually see where you have duplicate edges or vertices or holes and stuff like that. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, I use that quite a lot, because a lot of things, it's very easy to get, if you have some messy geometry, for example, or if you have polygons inside each other. I use the sub-D mode to just see where you get like really weird, like unexpected shading. Like when
Yeah, you'll visually see it instantly that way. Yeah, it's really cool.
So I try to do that quite a lot. And then when it comes to things like, for example, here I have a mock Boolean model. And this is, if I would clean this up by hand, it would take, quite a lot of time. So what I try to do is that I save out like a copy of the whole thing. Let's see here. And then I can just advanced mode. Then I can just go in and I can select and remove edges on these instead. So I'm going to see if these other UVs. Yeah. So for example, here I was just quickly doing, just duplicating out cylinders, and they have like way too many sides. They have 24 sides, and since they're just regular geometry, and actually I'm going to put this UV mode. Since they're just actual regular geometry, they're not procedural meshes or anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to select every other edge in the UVs like this instead of just going and doing it manually on all the models. So now I have selected every other edge, but not the whole edge loop. So I just double click and remove that, and I have removed half the edge loops on every cylinder, and it's doing that automatically, or like all at once instead of doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty slick as well, because not only can you just you don't have to move around the object since it's cylindrical. You can see them easier laid out in a rectangle to select them that way. But then you're also selecting all of them across the barrel there.
So, for example, I broke these, so I have to bring those back. But these guys work pretty well. The same thing with these. If I want to.
So do you typically work kind of in this mode with the UV window open as well while you're modeling, just to sense check if it's laying out UVs at the same point in time too?
Not really, since I know that it's going to create the UVs for me automatically. I try to just let them be, and for certain cases like this, I know that they are useful. So it's only for a certain kind of meshes. It's like when I'm doing this, or for example, I'm doing cables or pipes, some type. I use that a lot. So here I'm just going to clean up just cleaning up the bit, and just a lot of the time I just merge polygons, because since Modo removes all the polygons, or like everything that's not being used. So if you have a whole bunch of polygons and you just select them and then merge them, it's going to remove all the unneeded verts. So probably the merge tool is probably the tool I'm using the most, say, when I'm doing low poly. And then just like, for example, this is another case where it's like you select every other edge, but if you know that you're going to do that, you can make that into a macro.
Yep.
So let's see, which I have to find my hotkey for it. I just forgot something. I have too many hotkeys. But I made a macro, for example, that selects, if you do a selection like this, it's going to select the full selection and then do an edge loop selection and remove. So, for example, you can only select 2 edges on a cylinder, and then or like a big pipe thing, and it's going to remove everything. It's also very convenient when doing, very, very big you have to remove the sides from lots of, very large cylinders. So if I take these guys and just the same material, now I have a base for the low poly for this. So I'm actually just going to copy paste that and then hide this later. And then I can just do the same thing with this one and just do a quick merge to get rid of things like the small points that are close to the cylinder cuts. And let's see if I can grab next. Pick this guy here. So sometimes when I have, I try to build things in preparation for the low poly. And this is like one of those typical things where I could build all of this as separate elements. Or I can just, merge them all into one. It really depends on your poly count. But in this case, I'm just going to grab all of this and I'm just going to merge it. So then I just remove pretty much the majority of the geometry. Just using the merge tool, and then I'm just gonna start merging the objects using booleans one by one. So I'll just take this one and merge it in, and there's gonna be some stuff like this where it's it's pretty close, but if you do a perfect align, it's not gonna boolean well either. So you have to kind of play around a little bit with this, go to sub mode, merge it, and it's going to be a little bit not like that.
You lost that top edge there. There you go.
Yeah. I try to do stuff like that instead of trying to go in and hand build the geometry and start to rebuilding it so that it aligns nicely. I just kind of brute force it and then merge it and then unmerge it, or like triangulate it. So that way I don't have to go in and like click individual verts and start merging things by hand. Same thing here. Like I'm not going to bother with the fact that it's not properly mirrored. I'm just gonna this and just make sure it intersects a tiny bit. I'm just gonna boolean this together, and it's gonna have like tiny stuff like this. And it's easier for me to just have these kind of little tiny overlaps and then just do a quick little merge like this than to have things that are perfectly aligned and throwing errors because of the booleans. For example, yeah, if you do stuff like this, here it's going to be a problem. What I should do here is just make sure that there's no intersection there. Then I just do a drag weld, worst, get most of the worst fenders out of the way. Since the precision is pretty low on these kind of things anyway, it doesn't matter if it's it doesn't align perfectly, especially not on this kind of scale. So that's why you get away with you just kind of align things with each other and then brute force weld it, and then later I can just do a quick same thing with since these are all flat things, I can just do a cut and then I can just do doesn't matter the fact that this is not aligned with the center. I'll just align it with the center and delete it, Now it's perfectly aligned and mirrored. A lot of the time I tend to not use like a mirroring when I'm doing the low poly, because it's easier to just mirror it afterwards, because you're dealing with, you know, simple geometry anyway, than to just sit and make sure that the mirroring has not broken because of some, you know, custom script or whatever you're running. I tend to be very make sure that I delete all the geometry that I don't need. So something
Well,
like this.
it's smart because you're just faster that way. If you worry a little bit less about it while you're creating it and kind of fix it in the end, it's just a lot quicker.
Let's see. I'm not sure if the stream died, or is it working for?
It should be working. Although now I see your screen share might have stopped. No, I see your screen share over here. Let's see what's going on here. There we go. We're back live now.
All right.
Sorry about that. But now it's back dead again.
Oh.
Hang on here a second. It's back. There we go.
All right. Okay, let's see, where were we? Yeah, so a lot of this stuff with the, you know, when I'm building low poly, is in just the preparation of making your job easier for yourself. I mean, the biggest difference in how you make an efficient low poly is in how you build the high poly, because you can make something that will, you know, take double the poly count and, you know, twice the time, and all it takes are, you know, a few little nudges here and there, and it will be that much easier to build. And, you know, it's a lot about just putting focus on where it's most efficient. So things like, you know, cables, cylinders, all that stuff is pretty much done from the very beginning. You just copy paste those from the high poly. If you're doing it the right way, you're basically just copy pasting your high poly geometry, and then you're done.
Do you like to keep like a copy of that high poly untouched on the side as you're actually reducing mesh with the low poly version?
Yeah, so what I'm doing is like what I'm doing here, where I have I just copy everything into a new layer.
Yeah.
And I convert it there. So for example, this guy here has weighted subdies, which, you know, look very nice, but what I tend to do is just lower the subdivision level like this and use that as a starting point. So I lower the subdivision level, and then I get rid of all the unnecessary stuff that doesn't bring any you know, anything to the profile. So we have stuff like this, and it's much easier to clean this stuff up before you freeze the mesh than after. So I try to just go in and just do a little cleanup. Sometimes I do some reweighting of the edges, just stuff like this. You can actually you know, try to just reweight the edges so that it doesn't transform that. So it doesn't change the shape of the mesh, but it keeps the geometry level down. Just makes it easier to convert things. So stuff like this. So the purpose on the high poly doesn't do it now, so I'll just get rid of it. But this one I can't remove, because this one actually contributes the shape. So I start with something like this. I delete or like I freeze the subd, and then I just go in and just start deleting loops really quick. And you learn pretty quickly which loops you can start by deleting, because you are if you have the lowest subd level, you're just gonna have one extra loop per polygon. And unless it's a polygon that has some kind of curvature like these guys, it's not really needed. So I try to just, you know, go in, I just select a whole bunch of these, and then I remove everything except this part, because I'm gonna end up with a lot of shitty stuff like these angons here. They're not nice. They're overlapping. They're weird. But I don't care because it's easier to just do this and then clean this up later than to sit and try to do a nice topology, because it's a hard surface object. It doesn't need nice topology. You can have the worst topology in the world. The only thing that matters is how it bakes down later, since it's not deforming. So I just do, I just select all the edges, then I just go in and I actually deselect the stuff that actually has some curvature. Like none of this stuff actually is needed, so I just delete it. Then I just see if I mess up something I shouldn't, but it looks fine. Stuff like this here, but I just go in and delete that too. So if I have something like this, something look a little bit cleaner. Sometimes when you're building things like this as well, you get a little bit fooled by the shading, because when you're deleting something like this and now suddenly the edge is hard, so it looks like, oh wait, maybe I removed a little bit too much, maybe this actually contributed. It's like, nah, it's like a very, very minor angle shift. So I'm just gonna turn on the full smoothing instead, so I don't get as tricked. But then you get ugly smoothing on these kind of guys, but whatever.
It's really mesmerizing to watch you do this. And it really shows just how the selection tools in Modo kind of enable your speed in a lot of ways. It's just you're able to just select what you want to select. It seems like just intuitively. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just seems so natural for your workflow.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, making low poly models is half the job is just making good groundwork with your low poly and your design and how you build it, and then the rest of it is basically selections, and it's pretty much selections and collapsing edges. It's only when you start to do like very complicated or like you do retopology on things that you can't reuse, and that's when then it's just topology. And this for hard surface stuff, there are very few shortcuts because it's so complicated to do that kind of stuff. But
Yeah, I mean, you're actually, yeah, I mean, so far in this, in the 30 minutes you've been going here, you haven't really created much of anything for new topology or retopology
yeah,
on this. It's just been selecting and deleting
and then I when I
and
have
merging,
something,
like you're saying,
yeah.
the merge tool, especially.
So when I have something like this, then I can triangulate it, and then I can start to flip the edges around. And then, I get a decent topology really like relatively fast. And I have things like this where it's, this is not going to matter.
Yeah, I love the style. Just don't worry about it. You'll fix it eventually as you as you reduce it down and simplify it.
Yeah, because
I think that's key, because I see a lot of young artists, they'll kind of maybe just get stuck on how it should be triangulated in this one area, trying to fix it when they could just blow it all away and then recreate it real quickly.
yeah, because it's a lot of the time you're just sitting and you're just you're going to be pulling things down lower and lower and lower for quite some time before you're done. So it does make sense to try to keep a nice topology on a hard surface mesh while you're working on it. Just nuke everything from orbit and then recreate what you need. So in this case, for example, here it's I have too much stuff going on in here. So what I'm going to do is just going to select this guy here and then just select this one and then just do a flood fill here and then just delete that. It's like I don't need any of that stuff, so I'll just take this and shrink this down and then do a bridge. And then I didn't have to go in and clean that stuff up as well. So sometimes you just that you really shouldn't be bothering about trying to clean something up, and then I just select everything around it and then just delete it instead.
So I have to ask, after all of this, why not use? There's lots of different various tools out there for poly reduction. Just some type of a mass scale poly reduction across the entire object. Why not use something like that versus this technique?
Because it doesn't work basically. I mean, for a certain kind of objects, it works great. Like if you're making rocks, it works a lot better. But when you're doing something that has a little bit of precision, like a gun, and where you actually have to make a lot more artistic choices on where do I put the polygons, because it's not just like an even distribution of polygons. It's basically you're making choices about
what's important and not. Yeah,
what's important, what contributes to the model. So I'm gonna take this guy, and I'm just gonna merge these two.
It can, I agree. I mean, it's good for certain types of things, but on other types of things, it can create more work than it saves you work sometimes too. So you got to pick and choose when to use something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes it just depends on your end output too. If you need to do 100,000 assets that need to be 80% quality really quickly, that's the way to do it, obviously, than to go item by item, polygon by polygon.
Yeah, but it's for something like games where you have, I mean, some kind of budget to stick with. I mean, in theory, I could in theory you can probably get away with more, but it's also it's so fast to clean something up, like 95% of the way, and a lot of the stuff, and a lot of the hard stuff is just in the artistic choices, not artistic, but the technical choices when you're building your high poly model. So this stuff happens a lot when you're doing using the quick booleans. Is that it triangulates stuff, and then I just use Seneca's quadrilate script to just re-quadrilate it. It's very convenient. Yeah, a lot of this kind of stuff where it's I just merge things. It doesn't really matter all that much. So, and then when you're going to the UV mapping phase of it, like what I tend to do is it's the same thing there. It's all about the selections, and sometimes you kind of learn what to select. You kind of know instinctively what the shells will be like in the end. So I try to. A lot of people split their UVs a lot more than they need to. So I try to start with the absolute minimum amount. Take something like this. I know that I'm gonna. This is an inside. This is on the bottom side. This is not very important. So add that boundary selection. This stuff probably won't work either. This stuff probably, it's going to be a bit messy, but it's going to work. So I'm going to bring up a UV window for this. Use it. And then I just do something like this. And you have, it really depends on what kind of stuff you're doing, what kind of distortion you can accept on your UVs. But for me, I usually do something like this. And then I just, relax this, and I use the area weight here, because if you don't, the default is like 10%. I usually crank that up to like 50 or something, and that just distributes the size of the polygons in a more even fashion than the default one. And I just do something like this, and the align tools with. And
yeah, those are super handy.
Yeah, I use those all the time nowadays, and especially when doing things that are not custom, so it doesn't actually need to be it's not actually depending on the packing, just like layout on an existing chart. I use those all the time. Main thing here is just half the job is just knowing what polygons to select. Something like this, super easy. You just select it, and then let's see if I can use it. Yeah. A lot of the time I just do stuff like this, and I kind of fudge things a bit like manually, and I just use the relax and then straighten. So using the straighten or locking the boundary, because I already made the boundary square, even though I can't use the rectangle tool because it's not actually a square. But the if I do a manual square, and then I can just relax within that and just lock the borders, and it will straighten things out within that square. So. I tend to hide things I'm not working on when I'm unwrapping. And I think one of the tools that, the scripts that I use the most when I do this is the script that I use the most is for this kind of stuff is Seneca's quick selection tool, where you can select based on angle. So a lot of the time you just want to select something like this part of the model instead of just doing this and having to deselect. I can just fire off the script. It will select everything within a certain angle threshold, and I can just add that to the boundary. So I do that like pretty much half the stuff I do is just selecting the boundary.
I'm gonna get a lot of requests after this video, I can tell. These are really good ones though. They're pretty simple tools too.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Just, I mean,
are they macros or are they actually scripts in a lot of cases?
I think
that one's a script. I'm pretty sure.
That one's a script. How this even works? To cut more. I hate adding cuts.
Some of your other selection ones were macros, so it looked like.
Yeah. Let's see. I also have, for example, a macro that selects everything that is already UV mapped, and then just hides it, because I want I work with everything in one layer when I do a low poly, and then I just unwrap things, and then just hide everything that I'm not done with. So I just get kind of an overview of what I'm working on.
Yeah, that's cool. You work your way down to nothing.
Exactly. Oh, right. Symmetry. A lot of the stuff, when I have something that is not actually mirrored and it's not actually prepared, like this kind of stuff, and I deleted half of it, then you have kind of these things, and I just move everything to the origin or to the center, and then I just merge. I can get rid of all these those kind of things, and I don't have to clean them up manually. I don't have to actually recut along the axis, do stuff like that. And when it comes to just like the unwrapping tools, I'm a little bit just working in the dark when it comes to which axis to project from and stuff. So I find it easier to just go in and just change things and see when I find a good one, and just go with that one. Okay, that one's good. Let's just do that, and then just relax a couple of times. Same thing there. I tend to use relax several times in a row instead of just cranking up the number of samples, because it's just faster to do this than to do like go in and tweak the number of iterations. Because if you crank up the number of iterations super high, then the next time you are gonna fire off the script, it's gonna be set to have super many iterations, and it's just gonna sit and chew on that for like a long time. Shaded mode. And for me, it's like a lot of the time, it's just you're making a choice between having very nice straight UV patches or just having fewer polygons. So things like this, if you unwrap this now, I'm just gonna. It's gonna be. I mean, technically, you should probably split these. Like, oh, that's slightly better, but is anyone really gonna notice? And it's not gonna show up in the normal map. So unless it doesn't, I don't, and I just let it stay like this. And I'd rather use those, few vertices that I gain from that and just put them somewhere where they can be better used. I just try to keep my polygon counts down as much as I can when it comes to like all these things that actually don't matter right now. So I keep the vertex count down on all the stuff that I don't know if it will be a problem, and then I can add all the details that I want. And if I have any problems, I will solve them when I'm baking instead of trying to solve the problems before, because I think it will be a problem. And I see a lot of artists, they're doing splits in the UVs and they're doing stuff like that, and then when you bake, they get a perfect bake because they fixed problems that they didn't know if they were going to have. So I try to do it the way around and just make it as low poly as I possibly can. And then if I get a problem, I'll fix that when it shows up. And most of the time it doesn't show up. So
it all depends how something like this, you may never get that close to it on screen ever. Like that whole part might be 5 or 6 pixels on screen.
Well, even if it's like an FPS game or FPS gun, I would rather just make everything like low detail, or like not low detail, but I would remove all the stuff. Like I'm not going to try to fix smoothing errors that have not happened yet and stuff like that. So I just do everything as simple as I can when it comes to splitting UVs, doing stuff like that. Like if I mean, it's easier these days when most of the painting is not by hand in Photoshop. People are doing things in Substance Designer, Substance Painter, Quixel, and so on. You actually just paint on the mesh, so then you don't have to care as much about it. It's easier to just work towards as simple mesh as possible, and simple UVs as possible, and then just add in detail where needed.
I think in general that's a really it seems to be a theme about how you approach this overall. Like you worry less about things all the way through, and then if it shows up as an issue, you fix it. Which is, by worrying less as you're going through it, you're saving just a ton more time.
Yeah, and it's much easier to. I mean, there are certain things that if they're going to be a problem, you can fix them before they happen. But a lot of the time, when it comes to baking, a lot of the time it's very arbitrary, and I mean, you're basically dealing with image compression and math, and I mean, a lot of the time you can't predict if something is actually going to be a problem, and it also depends on how perfectionist you are.
Yeah, how OCD you are. That'd be the hard part.
Exactly. So I'm going to take this guy here, which is another mock boolean mesh, and now I'm just going to copy paste it instead, and then do the booleans manually, because a lot of the time I'm doing lots of booleans in using mock booleans. I have them live, and I'm doing stuff like that. Okay, no, it didn't want to. And instead of trying to then convert all the different cuts, sometimes it's just like a few of the cuts that I need. So in this guy's case here, it's only like I have these two. So that's the only thing I actually want to do. I go to my mesh, and I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit. And then I'm just gonna freeze this and just the booleans, and it's done. I just do a quick merge to get rid of all the tiniest intersecting triangulation issues and stuff like that.
When you're selecting those loops there, are you merging them as well? I couldn't quite tell what you're doing there.
I am almost never merging loops. I'm deleting them instead.
But merging the vertices on those loops, is that what you're doing? Or
I'm doing this, you mean? I'm just deleting them.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I'm selecting one and then just doing this. And that's, as long as you have a decent, topology when you start on your high poly model, so you know that you're not gonna, have a loop that is, never ending, and you just keep on selecting stuff, and then you accidentally remove the entire model.
It's where undo is your second favorite feature.
But most of the time, this is like the majority of the things that I end up doing. It's only when it's the level of complexity has to be so high for me to actually build a new mesh from scratch for a low poly. It's almost always reusing things. Even if it's something where it looks like it's a brand new mesh, a lot of the time it's just me taking the low poly elements and just kind of inflating them and merging them together. Something like this, for example, I could in theory just merge all of this into one blob, because you wouldn't be able to tell to do the baking. And a lot of the time I do that for really complicated machinery stuff. I just make sure that there's enough stuff in there so that I don't have to actually spend the polygons on every single part. I can get away with just kind of making a big blob out of it. And that's often the most time-consuming part, where you actually have to make sure that you have a new mesh that actually works with the high poly, and you kind of have to go back and forth a little bit and make sure that it actually bakes properly. And those are like the worst. Those are the worst parts to build. Try to avoid those, but just by not just building them in the first place. Here it's like, I know that I'm gonna remove all of these things. Like, I don't need any of this. So instead of doing that by hand, I just select all of this and I just merge it. And then I know that I'm gonna have verts here. So I just select all, convert the selection to verts, and then I just delete those. And I don't have to go in and manually do things. Just merge it, and then just, I don't care that this is just one big messy and gone. Let's see, any other part I should grab?
So if anybody online has any questions, feel free to chat them in as we're coming up close to the top of the hour. We can try to work in a few audience questions as we watch. I'm just completely mesmerized, Tor. I'm a little jet lagged again. I seem to always do these Modonaut Mondays after a long flight over to London. Having that same scenario with this one as I was with Rich, but it's really cool. I just love watching a master work like this.
It's kind of it's very satisfying to do.
It kind of is. Yeah, I used to do this a lot too when I was in a long time ago, eons ago, when I was a game artist and in production, I used to do a lot of this type of work too. It is satisfying in kind of a weird way.
Yeah, you can just sit and just
Just zone
endlessly.
out, get the
Yeah,
tunes running, and just zone
it's
out.
like, all right, I should talk. I totally forgot. I'm just clicking things. But yeah, it's 90% of the time it's just about managing selections and stuff. And I do a lot of those things. I don't do them as much these days because I'm using weighted subleads pretty much all the time now. And so nowadays I don't. I used to have this thing where, for example, when I made edge loops. So if I would have a cylinder and I would add these, edge loops, I would automatically tag these edge loops, so that when I wanted to do a low poly later, I could just select all
Oh,
the
I see.
stuff and just remove it, because it was just faster that way. But nowadays, since I rely so much on weighted subleads, I don't really use that anymore.
So you're using 12.1 here, right?
It's,
Currently, have you how much have you dug into 12.2, and what would be your favorite feature of 12.2 at this point?
I would say the workbench
Yeah,
is probably the biggest one. And what's
it's
it called?
probably holding you back from getting this system. We were talking a little bit before we started the live stream about your config files and struggling to get them to work on 12.2 with the system.
Yeah, I just need to actually do it.
Yeah.
I use it at work. I don't use it at home because I haven't had the time to do that yet. But I'd say
The workbench, though, should make that stuff a little bit more portable into the future, too. So the more that you kind of customize your own forms and, benches, if you will, it just become easier to save out and load up into a new release.
Yeah, no, I forgot what it's called. The other new feature. What was it called? Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited to try the strips for mesh fusion.
Oh, mesh fusion strips, yeah.
Yeah, that one, and the what's it called, the UV tool. I forget the name.
There's about 100 of them.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of quality of life stuff that I want to use, but I really haven't had as much time to dig into those yet. I'm lagging behind on implementing new workflows.
You're busy. You're busy doing real work, I guess. Not that that isn't, but growing teams, building companies.
Yeah, doing that.
It's been a busy year for you.
Yeah, it's been very busy. It's very fun. But yeah, I think that like overall now it's I'm doing so much low poly and game art stuff. So for me, it's right now a lot of my focus is just on doing a lot of basic things like selection, like better selection tools, more macros for that, more just more things for speeding up low poly creation, UVs, stuff like that. Stuff that is not the sexy stuff for mechs, but it's where most of the time is actually spent.
It seems like you have it pretty well down, pretty well optimized, though, and all the stuff that I've seen you stream out there before.
It's I mean, one of the problems is that I spent so much time optimizing my high poly workflow that it ends up being like, well, the high poly is not the part that takes time. So then you have to start optimizing the other kind of workflows, which is not the kind of thing that looks cool, but it's necessary to get to the end result.
Indeed. So there's kind of quiet out there on the YouTube right now. Any other questions, anybody? Got quite a few watching still. And then, yeah, many always ask, where can we find a recording of these? These are all the Modonaut Mondays are recorded. and then posted later up on the community. So if you go to once you're logged into the Foundry community and you click on your little icon, underneath of there, you'll see a Modo Premium content menu item. And you click there, and that's where you can find all the Modonaut Monday recordings, along with pretty much all of the paid training that we offer available on the website as well. You get access to all of that for free. I hope to get up there some additional content. So we're working on getting some HDRI images up there for environments, working on getting some mesh op assemblies and some other cool stuff added into there other than just training content as well. So we're going to continue to build that out. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we have a few of those things almost ready to go. But as we go into next year, we'll continue to build that out more and more as well.
I just keep on unwrapping things.
You could just go for days and days.
Yeah, it's very rewarding.
So what's on the top of Tor's feature wish list? I will ask that.
It'll probably actually be something as mundane as improvements to the bevel tool.
The bevel tool.
Yeah.
Greg hit me hard with that in the 12.2 webcast as well.
Yeah, it's like my number one tool that I use.
Yep.
It's just especially when you're doing sloppy geometry like I am, because I'm doing a lot of Boolean things together, and there's kind of it's not exactly quad topology, and there's just weird semi-intersecting stuff, triangle fans and
yep.
And I just want to bevel and get a clean bevel in all that. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing like most of the time these days. So I would say that, and how many things can I wish for? No.
Just one.
Oh.
No, I think I mentioned a little bit on that other previous call. We were just kind of at a bit of a crossroads with the bevel tool itself. And it's not so much we're not going to continue to improve it. It's where to improve it. Is it things that could be better suited as specific tools outside of the bevel tool? So we're already looking at a few features in that area that help the topology, just help situations that are very unpredictable, and a little bit less of a. It's hard to create a generalized solution within the bevel tool itself, is the best way to put it. So sometimes we need a specialized additional tool to fix those topology problems in a different way.
Yeah.
So we're looking at some things like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we're ever going to really stop trying to improve things like that, because that's just really the core of what makes Modo a great modeler. And we definitely want to continue to stay on the front edge of all that.
And I think that deferred updates for the similar to Mesh Fusion, in Mesh Ops would be great, because that would really make it easier to do way more complicated, sub-D, more Boolean stuff, for example.
Yeah, that's one that I really want to see as well. And there's a little bit of I don't know if a hack is the right word, but there's a way that you can kind of see that in action, where if you just went to the render layout and you just kind of worked with a schematic of the mesh ops up while preview is rendering, there's kind of an inherent deferred update that occurs there. And it makes working with really, really large, complex mesh op assemblies really fast. So it's kind of created kind of a proof of concept, if you will, of what deferred updates could do for the procedural system, and gives us a pretty good idea of the types of performance gains and just the general workflow that we could get by doing something like that. So Definitely of interest. No real time commitment on that one, but it's something that's high on our list as well to look at for the 13 series.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Well, not a lot of chatter online. I think you must have blew everybody away. It's really cool to see this stuff in action. I really appreciate the time you took out of your busy day. I know you guys are deep into production on the new game already. So thank you so much for joining us. Anything else that you want to mention or put a shout out for? Are you hiring? Are you recruiting at all right now?
We are looking for animators, actually, animators and VFX artists.
There you go. So polish up your portfolios, everybody. Get them over to Tor at Neon Giant there in Sweden. How many? What are you hoping to grow out to next year?
We're gonna
50,
stay.
100?
No, we're gonna stay small but happy.
It's small but happy. I like that. I like that approach. Cool. Well, thanks again, and thanks for everybody online for tuning in and watching the presentation. It will be recorded, and I think we usually get them up within a couple weeks' time. We got to put some titles and slates on these, and then we'll repost them. I don't think it'll take too long, but you should see that up there on Modo Premium content here shortly. So thanks, everybody. And with that, I'm going to stop the broadcast.